welcome to another episode of the Petey Performance Podcast. I'm up in Louth today having a conversation with Ciaran Sloan, who works here with Louth GAA and has previous experience working with Ulster Rugby and with Down as well. We talked all things football, all things GAA. We talked structures in regards to how counties are set up and how they can assist clubs with their S&C development. We talked in great detail about ACL rehab and a less traditional approach to it. And we talked about all the lessons he's learned in the last 12 months as well. So hopefully you all enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it, please remember to like it, share it and send it. Ciaran, post-car troubles, we are here in the Louth GAA Centre of Excellence. Or what's the name? Do I have to attach a sponsor to that?
But it is quite a long name. Protection and Prosperity Centre in Darver. The Centre of Excellence here in Darver, just outside of Dundalk. So, it's great to have you up. We have a bit of a mission on our hands to get this car on the road again afterwards. But it's great to have you up, and I appreciate you travelling up.
Yeah, well, it was probably around this time last year when you messaged me initially to meet up, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was. It was around this time too, and then I think I was pushing ticket sales on you as well. I think we Gareth Sanford was coming over, and I think it was August or near the middle of August. So I think I was trying to flog tickets and reach out to yourself and a few other coaches and just to make the contact. And it's good to finally actually meet in person now after.
I was trying to coax you into buying a set of golf clubs as well so we could connect over a game of golf. But I remember I couldn't come to the conference with Gareth because we had our first round of championship the following day, I think it was, because it was a Saturday, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And we were playing on the Sunday, and I could have travelled up and down the road, but I suppose one aspect of what I try to do professionally is be as professional as possible. And what I was thinking was, would I like if one of my players did an hour long or an hour and a half long journey up the road and then focused really intently on a subject for the day? Would they turn up with the same sharpness the following day for the match day? And that might be thinking very in-depthly about it, but I think if you're going to be a successful coach, you probably need to think about those things and be that committed at times.
Yeah, no, 100%. Especially on match days, bringing that enthusiasm and having the players bouncing and in your warm up and having loads of energy, it's key. It's taxing when you're obviously trying to study a topic and listening and even just mingling with different coaches and stuff. It does take the energy out of you, and especially around championship, your energy has to go into all your players and managing the management team as well. It is a big thing.
After championship, actually, I always find that there is a bit of an energy crash, for me anyway, regardless of the result, just because during the championship you're going week to week to week to week, and although you're not involved with the senior panel here in Louth this year directly, you've probably experienced that in the past. Is it even more taxing in an inter-county season?
Yeah, I'd have to say it is. Yeah, it's very. So I obviously had a few years with Louth and I was with Down previous as well, and it is come the end of the championship. You never have anything booked. I remember even 2 years ago, I think Offaly, it might have been just after the year after COVID, 2 or 3 years ago, Offaly had beaten us, and it was a hard defeat to take. I just remember ringing the wife and saying, book us somewhere now for the rest of the week because they can't face anybody. I was wrecked, and you just chilled and just switched off. And it's the same every year. Then the following year, then last year, then it was the same as well. You just kind of go into a hole. Obviously, you're depressed enough if you're knocked out. There's only one team that can win it every year, so when you are knocked out, you just be wrecked. That following week, you just totally switch off and just recharge the batteries. It takes a lot out of it the year, and just chasing players and managements and results, the highs and lows, the rehabbing players and go through their emotions. So it does. By the time it finishes, it's just it is. You just go underground for a week. What I do anyway. Maybe after a beer or two, and then go underground.
The wife was probably happy that you were getting to go away finally.
Yeah, she was delighted. She's like, "Are you sure that this isn't?" I got her on the hop that year. So, kind of last year. Then we mapped something out for later in the summer, but still took the week off afterwards. Had the night out on the Sunday, Monday, and then put the head down. You'll be wrecked from the year.
specific pundits, I suppose, would think that those attached to an inter-county panel, maybe in the backroom staff, wouldn't feel that pang of defeat or that depression after a loss, because they think that the people that are invested in those positions and invested in the team in that way, be it a strength and conditioning coach, physios, sports psychologists, etc., they're only doing it for financial gain. And I'm talking about Joe Brolly here, by the way, probably. They would think that at the end of the season, those people wouldn't have the same feelings that the players do. But from what you've said there, because of all that you put in throughout the year, the many long hours, like, you do feel exactly the same way. Yeah, and I know myself, I've felt the exact same way myself.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like you're building a relationship with the players. Like every kind of team, obviously, with Ulster Rugby in a professional setting too. Like that's your day-to-day job. Like so, you're building friendships for life. So a lot of the coaches that still chat, a lot of the players that still chat. And that's a different setting to obviously in inter-county, but inter-counties, the way they've gone now, like you're spending so much time with your coaches, with your players, like you build relationships and you build friendships with them. Obviously sometimes you have to be more standoffish because you have to keep discipline and stuff, but you're building, like you're just building relationships all the time with your coaches, getting closer. I suppose the big thing with the role, and maybe pundits don't see it like that, probably, well, for me obviously it's my full-time profession. Coaches I've worked with in the past in Gaelic settings have been full-time too, is that there's probably no other job in the world outside of coaching that your work is on display for the public every weekend. So the quality of what you work Monday to Friday is on display on Saturday, and if Saturday doesn't go well or does go well, you're praised as a genius. If it doesn't go well, you're praised as there's holes picked straight away, and usually conditioning gets picked first. But like it is the only profession in the world that every week the public get to judge your quality of work. Like if you're a teacher, there's no one seeing you at a weekend. Like so, that brings a pressure in itself too. And then you add in all the noise, obviously with pundits and reporting and stuff. So it's an intense. The way in the county now, in particular, it's gone like pro sport. It's very, very intense. Everyone's kind of micro-analysing everything, and that brings its own pressures from a coaching aspect and obviously a performance S&C aspect as well. Like so, yeah. By the end of the year, you're ready to put the head down and recharge, because as you said, you have to bring energy every year, every session, and that's hard. Yeah, it is. There is a skill to it, an art to it, I think, anyway.
And that's what we were actually speaking about prior to switching on the recording. Was you were asking me about private space, or you'd said everyone in the private space is going really well. And I don't think that's true. I think the people that you see more often in the private space, they're naturally the ones that are doing well in the private space. There are tons of other people that probably aren't doing quite so well. I was one of those a few years ago that was struggling in that space. But my worry about the private space is, for myself, coaching an individual is very different to coaching a team. Programming for an individual is quite different to coaching a team. Like, to coach a team, as you said, is a skill. You have to be able to command a room. And for me, my worry is, if I do go back coaching teams soon, am I going to have the same level of sharpness? Is that skill set going to be still well developed to do so? But in a way, I'm in a more privileged position, because I've actually done that for a number of years prior to just working individual now. Whereas there are a lot of young coaches going straight into the private space that potentially have never had that experience. And then from the conversation we were having, when interns come in or people come in that haven't got that experience, they're relatively green in relation to doing that, and they really do struggle in front of people. How do you think we navigate that as the private space grows even more?
Yeah, well, I was always joking with Casey when we were going through the rehab that I'm heading to the private space there. He's all seem to be in holidays for about 8 or 10 weeks and we're all enjoying life. But I think it's twofold. I think in what you're describing yourself is that I think once you go back into the team setting, it's like muscle memory. It'll come back straight away. Like I think when you're doing your one-to-one work, and that was probably in the rehab protocol with Casey. Like it was probably the first time really that you weren't in a full team setting, that you were able to just hone in on one player, and it was just one player you had to worry about. So like obviously you can get kind of really deep into the intricacies of what makes that player tick, or where they need to improve on, or what they need to work on, which has massive carryover then into when you go back into the group setting. And like your eye, when you do get them players in the team, in the group setting, and then one-to-one scenarios, like you've developed a really good eye in that one-to-one. And then obviously in yourself, like you'll have various different players come with different issues. Obviously at that with Casey with his ACL, obviously in a team setting you've a wide range too. I think then it's a valid point is that the students or the interns that are coming out who haven't gone into the team environment ever really, and it's all just gone online, where do they get that exposure in that group setting? Because I think there is an art in using that word a lot already. I think there is an art in coaching big groups. At senior level it's a different challenge than at a juvenile or an underage level, but I do think you need to be able to command a room in both settings, and you need to be able to flow your session too, that there's not backlog, which is creating an environment, especially in juvenile level, where players are just standing around talking and just messing. So there is an art in that, and then commanding the room when you're speaking and coaching and talking to the group, that players are listening and they're not having a joke with their mate. And that's what you find when the interns coming out of college, is that sometimes they might be the same age of a few of the players too, and that. So it is controlling that room when you're speaking, the players are listening, and that's probably the biggest thing you find out of, like, they're all very knowledgeable coaches that come out of college, and if they're going into the online, they obviously back themselves as coaches as well. But it is controlling the room and getting the respect from the group that they're listening, and then getting them to do the work, because I do find like some of the younger coaches too don't sit. They kind of build that kind of more of a friendship, kind of banter relationship with players, but especially in the GAA world, and from my experience anyway, you have to sit on top of the player. Even when you're in the gym, you have to be like a player. Some players will just leave, just as an example, squatting, they just leave 60 kilos on it and just rep it out, and they think that's their job done. But yeah, like, we'll try and get away with that, and you have to sit on top of them, put more on, go here, and you have to. So there is that element too of controlling the room, but then having to sit on top of the players to make sure that they're getting the most out of their work.
Communicating with a group is different to communicating with the individual, but there are commonalities, and if you don't get that opportunity to communicate with the group, you're probably missing out on an aspect of one-on-one communication that you could develop. However, I would say that I get completely what you're saying in regards to the friendship level, seeing more eye to eye with the younger coach, and then potentially as a result of that not pushing the players on. But I think that if someone was actually your friend, if they saw you squatting 60 kilos, they would challenge you on it. I wouldn't let any of my friends be at that, to be honest. But I get what you're saying as well, in that there is almost some sort of a hierarchy and an authority that the coach needs to be able to do that consistently with all of the players. Did you still find that was necessary in the one-on-one sessions, or did you find with the one-on-one, the rehab with Ciaran, it was easier to challenge him because you're observing each and every rep?
Well, that is it, yeah. It's, yeah, in your one-to-one setting, you're there with the player. Well, like with Casey or with Ciaran, when he's doing his rehab, he's so diligent in everything he do. He's nearly teaching me stuff. But so like, yeah, but like when you are one-on-one with your players, like even in your group setting and you're rehabbing a specific issue with a player, like you're over them the whole time. You're with them, you're watching them closely. If they've nowhere really to go. You're just kind of standing there watching them, making sure, coaching them and making sure they're doing it. And I suppose that one-to-one stuff in the group setting is where you build your relationships. And when you feed back into the group, I suppose, yeah, it's in that group setting when you have maybe 5 or 6 to a squat rack, and you might have 30 lads in the gym. Ideally, obviously, you want more coaches than that, but in the GA setting, it's not always the case. That, yeah, when you're over coaching a rack or a group, that the other group then are kind of maybe just trying to get their bluff a wee bit, and it's kind of being able to control that and kind of being able to watch the whole picture when you're in the group. So yeah. Yeah, it's just keeping an eye on both. Like when you're one-to-one, it's yeah, more manageable, obviously.
You said earlier that potentially you refined your coaching eye when you were doing the one-on-one stuff, because you got to observe the way one person was moving a little bit more. Do you think coaches that solely focus groups miss out on that? Because from my conversations, even in the last day, or the last week anyway, I've been putting up stories of me doing one-on-one sessions with athletes, and some of it has been termed by other people movement-based or hyper-detailed, and they're asking me how I'm seeing that stuff. But all the coaches that I've been speaking to that have reached out in regards to that have all been coaches that exclusively work with teams, either in pro sport or in amateur sport, but in a professional role. Is there just so much that you have to do when you're working with a team that you don't have time essentially to focus on the detail of how each and every athlete is moving?
Yeah, no, well, it is hard, because like, you've 30, 35 players now at an intercounty setup. You might have yourself and maybe an intern with you, so you have a lot of players to coach and see. So, and then you also have the pressure of the coaching team wanting their best players on the pitch. So yeah, like a lot of it is in a big group setting where you have to, you have a lot of. You're watching a lot of legs move, so you're kind of nearly just focusing in on the big one. If there is a player with a big issue, that whatever you're coaching at that time, that you kind of hone in on it. Especially when the players are fit, you're just going over and kind of correcting them. And if you see a big issue with a player who's fit, let's just say he's fit and going into training, then like you kind of probe that a wee bit more with him, and then off the back of that, then like in terms of maybe one or two of his issues, it might carry over to one or two players, and then you kind of might feed that type of into different kind of pitch preps. And obviously if there's a few players then with different issues, then that kind of would make your whole kind of prep and what they're going to do on the pitch beforehand. But yeah, no, it's hard, but yeah, like when you're one-on-one with your player, like, and I learned that a lot with working with Ciaran in that one-to-one setting, like you can kind of just really go after different issues that you're seeing straight away. You can try different things. You're reaching out to different coaches as well, and you're learning from them as well, and like there's a lot of learning in that, and compared to when you're in your group setting where it is more of trying to manage all the things that are moving, plus all the other stuff that's going on. You're getting ready for going into your warm-up, you're managing the coaches, you're jumping in and out with your rehab players. Thankfully here with Loud, when we were there, and Mick's still there, the physio that we had with Loud, Mick Fanning's brilliant, and Ronan Carney, Aaron Roach was Mick as well, and Ronan Carney's connected to Santry's another. So there was 2 or 3, 4 of us there that were able to. So it wasn't just me. There was 4, and we had an intern with us as well. And between the 4 or 5 of us, we were able to keep on top. And like Ronan and Mick and Aaron, like were smart practitioners as well. Like, so it was great being able to. It wasn't just my eyes having to look at the 35. Like the boys were there as well, and they were able to hone in and stuff. And especially from a rehab perspective, we would have been leaning on the boys a lot as well. Like so. Yeah, there was my eyes, but there was a few others, so we were able to get a wee bit deeper with a few different issues that would have been there, or that we may have been able to see.
What did you learn throughout the process, and what aspect of your coaching eye did you feel developed the most?
In terms of
the movement in regards to the ACL, and in regards to the specific rehab that you were working on, and the return to play protocol, I guess. Yeah, I suppose kind of, I won't say the standard protocol, if you want to use that word, on probably didn't kind of fit the traditional approach.
Yeah, the traditional approach, if you want to say that, kind of you tick through your boxes. Like obviously with all rehab protocols, different things will crop up here and there. And we had to be more managed at the beginning with a cartilage with Casey and previous injury as well, and then we kind of flare up a fat pad in the middle of it as well, and we, like at the beginning, we had to really work around it to kind of get our strength working. Like we had to stay at a deep flexion, so that kind of delayed things. Then kind of, I suppose probably the biggest thing I did learn was that we always talk about kind of getting the player back up to being able to cope with the training load. So what players are covering in their sessions, that they like are building up to what a Tuesday session will look like, what a Thursday session will look like, what the weekly volume will look like. And I suppose in the process of doing that with Casey, we got a flare up of the kind of fat pad, and it was probably from there then, from chatting with different coaches, from chatting with Mick and Ronan, a who were with Loud, and then reaching out to Alan and even up in Santry as well, was that kind of, maybe don't go after that. For him, it was just about accumulating speed and getting up to his max speed, and using Alan's protocol in that, and taking your change of direction boxes, feeling comfortable in that, feeling comfortable in his knee. So we kind of moved away from chasing the plodding and the volume, and trying to get him up to what a Tuesday looks like on a match week, what a Thursday looks like, but more working about how his knee felt, getting his max velocity and getting his change of direction. And then when we went with that route then, that we were able to just feed him back into football then, and he was able to get his volume through the football instead of just plodding, and it's the skills based stuff, plus getting his, and that was probably the biggest learning I've had from the whole thing, was that.
Were you nervous around that, around him accumulating the volume in football specific drills and games rather than
when he
in the traditional approach?
I was. You were kind of going, geez, this is
chaotic.
But then you had to realise that his knee was really strong. He was feeling comfortable in his knee. The strength test showed that when we were in Santry. He was able to include 95% max of his speed, so he was able to hit these targets, and then he was able to hit his change of direction, so he was able to then just gather up his accumulation then through the skills base, and then obviously just feed into non-contact, into contact. So we were able to kind of get it, and the knee kind of stayed settled. Then after we had that initial flare up, once we got it under control, once we kind of fed him in gradually, then there's been, touch wood, there's been no kind of flare up. Obviously he's back in with the senior team now, and it's great to see.
Did you have to delve more into his specific GPS then in order to elude, I suppose, or figure out, is he getting the appropriate volume for this specific session and this specific week?
Yeah.
Did you have to pull him in and out of sessions quite frequently?
Yeah, well, I would have. I wouldn't. When we were kind of feeding back into the pitch session, and I would have kind of just relayed with Mick, because I wasn't directly involved this year with the senior team. I would have chatted with Mick, the physio, and Mick would have been on top of all this. Me and Mick would work really closely together on it. So between myself and then obviously Mick, we would have been kind of managing that, and the Wood boys would have been just managing where he comes in and out of the. Obviously, when he initially fed back in, it was still non-contact based. He was just getting his volume through the kind of drills based stuff, and maybe just top up slightly. But it was kind of, we kind of pulled totally away from all that plodding and just trying to hit them volumes, even with carrying ball and stuff. We kind of moved away totally from that and kind of went that speed approach and just feeding it back into the training. And then Mick would have managed when feeding back into the team then, obviously.
How early did you start into the drill based speed stuff and the drill based change of direction stuff? Because for some reason, probably because it's the traditional approach, that's why it's been the done thing for a long time, people would think and do think that traditional plodding is less risky than doing higher velocity drill based exercises that are focused on the details of sprint technique, I suppose, or change of direction technique in a more controlled environment. I still get conversations or get comments from physios and from coaches saying, you shouldn't be doing that this early in the protocol, that's really risky. Here's 80 meters by 8 by 3 to 4 sets, do that instead. And I'm just looking at it, I'm like, this is way more volume than what I'm doing. How is this the same? So how early did you get him back into doing that speed-based stuff? Yes,
well, it wasn't your straightforward traditional hit this mark, or he goes running this mark, or he goes jumping this mark. So it was probably around, it was December really before we kind of started, and as you say, that's probably where we were at the beginning of the protocol, and that it was that.
And when was the injury?
The injury was it was the Clare game
at the end of the previous season.
Yeah, the previous season. It was January the 28th. Yeah, down there was the first National League game, January the 28th, and then he went for the surgery a month later. It was the end of February. And then the first 6 weeks, then we had to he was kind of non-weight bearing obviously, but we had to kind of manage the cartilage in particular. and then we kind of, obviously it was all physio led at that stage, and then that kind of delayed it. And then with the cartilage issue, we had to stay out of flexion, and we had to stay away from, with that kind of delayed moving into your jump, landing, prep, and then into your running. So kind of there was a few delays along the line, but kind of when we got back to the running, when we were
had he hit his strength targets in terms of in those deeper ranges of flexion by the time he'd got back to
I suppose because we had to stay at a kind of deep flexion, so that, and then we went into deep flexion, then we had to kind of stay away from, we had to delay going into jumping, and had to delay going into the running, that we were able to go after so much of a strength block that, like, when he went and did his test, and
he was strong as anything.
Yeah, and I suppose that's kind of gave me the comfort for him then to move into that speed approach too, because he has all the strength targets. Now he still had to tidy up a wee bit in terms of his RSI and his jump landing and his kind of jump depth, and so there's still a wee bit of that we still needed to work on that bounce, which is natural, obviously.
But you were probably in shallower ranges anyway in what you were going to do in the speed based stuff, so you were probably, even though you would have been nervous, you were less nervous about that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I suppose then when he was ready to run, I suppose I was guided by that kind of, your 80 metres or 100 metres, and I suppose the learning came when the knee flared up and you had to go, right, this knee has a wee bit of history and trauma that it's not going to tolerate. Now Casey's always was learning, and he'd be chatting to coaches, and he'd be connecting you up with coaches that he was chatting to and all. Like, he's a really deep thinker of it, and he's like, some of the stuff he was coming back with and stuff, he was just mad to learn, and obviously it carries into the business he does now, and I even send players to him myself. But yeah, so like, obviously I was aware of Alan's work, and then Casey actually came across Alan's work too, and then the two of us were, we reached out then, and kind of that's where I got the knowledge of the 10-30 protocol and the dribbles, and that's the kind of approach we went with, and yeah, it was taking away that volume and that plodding, and sometimes you're sitting there going, is this enough? But yeah, no, his knee stayed really settled. Now obviously still the different things to work on to get him back in, like, but in terms of accumulating that volume, it was through that speed protocol, and it was, yeah, and the knee stayed settled, and then he was able to integrate into the football and accumulate a bit of it there, and then even when the team and were doing a wee bit of conditioning in between, he would have joined in on it, but it always stayed quite settled. So yeah, it opened my eyes to there is a different way, and that was a big learning from, and you're kind of, probably for me, you're kind of deep and digging into that. Is this the way to go all the time?
Questioning things more now.
You kind of do. There's a lot of learning in that, and I'm sure you do know Alan, like, so he's a smart coach, and he's
and everything is monitored and managed as well.
Yeah, and he's a very approachable guy, and he's like, so it was great, and we went over to meet with him as well.
Bath. The shed.
Yeah, and you were just there with a notepad, and you're just questioning or just picking his brain and chatting to him, and just how he moves, and we were talking about energy earlier, and the energy he brings to the sessions. Like, so I'd say by the time 10 o'clock comes, I'd say he must pan out.
Yeah. He does it in an interesting way as well. I will get him on the podcast eventually, but the 3 weeks on, 1 week off approach, so he can go hard for 3 weeks and then has a week on holidays. Not everybody has that luxury, I suppose, but it's an interesting way of managing your energy, because he is the most energy of any coach I've ever met, I think.
Yeah, no, he does.
It's like a Duracell bunny.
Yeah, like, we were leaving and another athlete was going in after us, like, and I was like the case, I was like, geez, I'm wrecked. I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And he's a serious operator.
It's interesting on the 10-30 protocol and the dribble protocol. I think people always question it, because I remember I had an intern working with me, an assistant strength and conditioning coach in my final season, and I was running the 10-30 protocol with a repetitive hamstring athlete, and he was kind of saying to me, look, sure, that's hardly enough running volume for him. Like, he's only going 30 meters like 10 times. Like, that's not going to be anything. And we had a live session on the GPS, on the tracker, and when he looked at the high-speed running volume at the end of that, he was like, holy moly, like how did he get through all that? So I don't think people think about that aspect of it, that when you're doing the dribble bleeds in the 30-meter block and you're trying to push the speed and the technical execution each and every rep, you're past 4.5 meters per second after 5 meters. For the rest of the 25-meter run, you're exceeding that almost. Well, you are exceeding it. And then for probably 10 meters after the 30, you're slowing down from it, but it's still accumulating volume over that movement intensity, I suppose, or velocity. So you can get through an awful lot of work in terms of tissue tolerance conditioning, while still repping patterns and positions that won't flare up the athlete, won't put any undue stress on tissues you don't want to stress, which in this case is the knee, in that ploddy, more flexed position. And you get to try to change the way that the athlete is moving as well to make them more efficient in time too. Move their bandwidth and shift it to more positive bandwidth, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's probably the biggest thing. It was maybe like Casey's mechanics weren't bad. There was a couple of things that we had to touch on, maybe just kind of a wee bit of a lag time on the ground and stuff. But like he was so tuned into that, like it was such an easy coaching. Even if you record him, when we were over with Alan, we recorded, like he was straight on it. He knew straight away, like so in that. But yeah, it is that being able to. It is, yeah. It's the mechanics that they're going to carry over when they do, like when you open up into a dribble bleed and you're kind of pushing out the speed, that they're hitting them key markers as they open up and as they develop. Like, and I suppose obviously this is an ACL case, like, but I would use it with another player that had hamstring issue as well, and he'd big lag out the back, sole of the foot, that kind of tilted the pelvis, but that kind of early doors we got him into the dribbles. By the time we got him to where he could start going into more max velocity stuff, like the shapes that we were developing in the dribbles and that kind of tilted pelvis was all gone. Not all gone, obviously, just still, but there was a massive improvement in that. And like touch wood again, he's another player again. He's still fit now, and he hit a max velocity, or he hit a max speed. He hit a PB in the rehab protocol the second last session before he fed back into the team, and then funny enough, the first game back, he then hit a PB in the game. So like that was really great to see, and kind of with him as well, we spent a lot of time in pelvic control. He was very stiff as well, and so kind of a lot of learnings that you would have got from the ACL rehab. That like you can carry it over.
And that approach has now become part of your system, I suppose, or it's in your repertoire to be used in different contexts, like you just said. You did see tangible differences in terms of movement mechanics, because the question that would be posed to me all the time, not even a question, it's a statement, it's you can't change how someone runs. But the two of us haven't been through it. Maybe in the past we thought it was pretty challenging. Sure, it takes a lot of reps, but it's definitely possible if you put the work in.
If you put the work in, obviously there's going to be times when they're fatigued in a game and different times, and there might be an overstride, or
you can't
like there is
prevent that.
It's like that, but I mean you can see marked difference from where even if them small changes, even if there is times to touch on it, but if they have improved how to move long term, it's going to be more beneficial for them, and you're hoping then that obviously there's no relapse of that there, and you can kind of just keep building on them, and obviously the more they're on the pitch, the more protected they are.
Has that process changed how you were approaching your work with the juvenile athletes at all? Have you done anything differently in terms of the work that you do on the pitch with those athletes as a result of maybe influence from the rehab process with Ciaran? Well, not just that, but the work with Alan, the rehab process with Ciaran, and with other athletes.
Young lads are so bloody robust because they're training every day between all the different sports to play the boys. But I suppose in terms of in the juveniles, there's probably more buckets for them to tick before you would try and throw them into a dribble. Let's just say, let's use that for an example. There's probably more buckets for them to tick before you would go there. Again, it's time with the juveniles too, because when they're here, you have to get their strength. touching a bit of the speed mechanics when you can. That's kind of more when they're in the holidays, you get more time to work on that. So the summer coming up now, you'll get more time to develop that, because they tick a lot of boxes when they are here. So in terms of kind of probably hasn't had a massive effect on what we implement at juvenile level, because there's so much. They're learning how to squat, they're learning how to hinge, they're learning how to crawl, they're learning how to jump, land, they're learning how to hold an acceleration position. So there's probably more basic buckets for them to touch before you would kind of go there. Now kind of when they get to minor then, to be fair, like with minors anyway in particular this year, like they are pretty robust, because obviously they're a lot lighter, but also that they do so much. Like you can try and control as much and you give them their breaks, but they're chronic training. Like they're at a lot so much, like they've such a capacity, like, so they're probably, like this year in particular, just because it's the most recent year with a minor team, that like we had very few, you didn't have many muscle tissue injuries, like it was just bangs, like, so probably haven't had it, which is good, an opportunity to implement it at a youth level. Obviously it's with adults it is, but there's just more buckets to tick with
juvenile athletes.
Juveniles before kind of jumping in there, more basic stuff, get them good at the basics before, in my opinion anyway, before kind of needing to branch out into that. Now if there is a specific thing or a parent comes to you about an issue that obviously there's growth maturation, there's issues there where you have to manage that there, but in terms of that, no, it's more just kind of managing the basic buckets where you get good at it, and then if there is kind of boys going through their maturation phase and stuff, just manage accordingly and stuff. But
so in terms of the content of what they're going through, it's obviously different as to what you've just stated there. Do you change your approach in terms of your coaching approach from your work with the senior team significantly, because obviously you're solely focused on the juveniles now? Do you think you're coaching in a slightly different way than you have in the last couple of years, say, with those older athletes?
I suppose kind of the pillars are all there, your core movements are all there. So at the juvenile level, we're looking to educate them and improve them and coach them and teach them about the different movements, your squat patterns, your hinge, you name it, your push, your pull. So there's a lot of that, and then obviously then you're kind of loading them up in them patterns. They'll have their basic strength stuff. At adult level, kind of, it depends on the training age of the group. I suppose in terms of because we're live at the senior team, I suppose, and kind of I came into the senior team first, their training age was quite low, so you're probably touching on, like you had to go after their strength capacities, you have to go after their power capacities. You kind of went back to your probably core pillars that you needed to develop that. Now that has always stayed constant, but over 3 or 4 years, the players are like they're 1.5, 6 times bodyweight squat, or 1.3 times bench, or whatever. They're big chinners, 50, 60 kilos. Some of them, the boys have put on a lot of mass over those years. Now there's some boys that obviously still needed more work to do. I'm not saying that for everyone. So it came to a point then where you had to balance. I suppose it was fret, and obviously with the National League the way it is now, like you're with your adult teams then in your pre-season, your November, December, and then into January was your window kind of really to kind of go after that physical development through the pillars that we discussed there. But then your kind of in season then was all kind of about freshness, but you still obviously wanted to keep that load there, so you were kind of more playing around with different stuff. Like I would have obviously, when I was starting out, probably would have kept my squat, my hex as my main strength. Now we still did keep them in, but then kind of when you went into your in season now, you were kind of looking at less fatigue and strength exercise. You were looking at your step ups, and kind of some boys then were just using a strength isometric, and then just feeding their kind of uppers around that. And I suppose if I go back into senior again, it's just all about freshness now with the way the new season is. That I think that National League, you'd probably look at, obviously each county's different. There's different counties who are peaking at different times, but say Louth would probably have numerous peaks throughout their year. Like it is about staying fresh, and it's probably about how best to create that program where I think a lot of that kind of run specific isometrics kind of tick a lot of boxes of getting that in your in season in that busy National League period, and then just kind of managing either side of that then, because it is all about at the moment just being fresh, being powerful, being explosive and fresh with the nature of the season, like, so it's probably a long answer to
it's a good answer.
The difference between, so to summarise, everyone has the pillars. We have our key movements that we want every player to hit, including at senior level, but then obviously at senior level there comes a point where they hit your strength targets, and then
you can back off slightly and give them what they need.
Focus difference, and then it's about keeping your freshness in the National League through different methods that keeps the players fresh. Obviously they don't want to be feeling DOMs, especially when it's week on week.
Is that the benefit then of getting athletes into these development teams? Because that's been debated online on Twitter over the last month or two, is the amount of players that are coming through into senior teams off the back of development teams isn't 100%. It's never going to be 100%. However, you've spent a number of years with the senior panel. You've increased their training age. You've focused on specific capacities and the development of those capacities, which has led to you being able to back off. I'm sure in the last couple of years, back off in terms of the more of a strength emphasis in those compound movements during the season. But you've earned the right to back off.
Yeah, and you'll have your times where you go after it and just keep that, but yeah.
Absolutely. You won't. It's not that you'll never do them, you can just do less of them. And then what you're doing is less fatigue inducing, so it allows the athletes to get from game to game a little bit better. Within the last couple of years though, since you've been able to back off in regards to those specific tools, I'm sure there has been some athletes that have transitioned from juvenile level to senior level. But given that they've had the exposure during their juvenile career to more of the physical literacy or the physical training, potentially they've been able to hit those specific strength targets earlier in their senior career because they have a higher training age coming into the setup. Is that fair to say? And is that the value in getting these younger athletes in week on week, and especially in the summer when you can see a lot of them?
I agree 100%, especially I think in a pro setup, that is what happens. Like, players coming out of the academy are seriously strong and can nearly hit your targets straight away at senior level. I think in inter-county, I think in kind of outside of your kind of big resource counties, I think, like, I suppose the challenge now is that whole after minor to 20s. So you have a few things going on there. You have your players that might make a 20s panel. What are they getting? Are they going back to their clubs? What have the clubs got in place? You'll have your players then that go on into your 20s. They might spend 2 or 3 years at 20s. Let's say a talented player that's just finished minor and he gets called up to a 20s team, and he might spend his under 18, under 19 and under 20s there. It's trying to fill that hole, and that's the challenge, and we're looking to kind of go after that now. At the minute we've had stuff in place, but we really need to go after it the way we did with the seniors in their off season. But it's when that 20 season finishes and they go back to their clubs, and it's probably the cycle louder in before kind of I come into the role, is that even at senior level, that November to May they're flat out in the gym, and then it would be backed off when they go back to their clubs. And I suppose it's that hole now at 17s to 20s, that how do we fill that hole if the clubs aren't providing an S&C program, and it's very demanding, and clubs might have the resources to be able to provide. So that's where we are. So in a GA sense, let's just say at 20s, they're getting 6 months of S&C, but then they might have 6 months when they go back to their clubs where they're not getting any, and then they're coming back into the senior team, and they may have had that cycle. So it's probably hitting the targets early probably isn't as happening as much in Gaelic as probably would in a professional setting, obviously, because you're having those lapses, and that's where now the challenge is for Louth as a county, and I'm sure there's other counties in the same boat, that how do we fill that gap when it's not inter-county season, that their players are still, obviously they're a club player first and foremost, but that they're still getting their physical development with the club and still performing for the club, but then still getting that work done that we need to get done so they can step up into a senior inter-county. And like Dublin as a club scene, like they've so much resources that they probably don't even need to worry about that, because most of their clubs, they've 2 or 3 probably full-time staff, and probably one of them's an S&C specialist, and they're able to fill those gaps even at senior level, where counties that are less resources, and clubs that we don't have that, so the counties have to be creative, or the more resource counties are just going to keep stretching away, like, because they're getting physical development 12 months of the year, and that's what I suppose over the last couple of years we tried to do with Loud team, was that they were still getting the physical development, but it was catered towards the clubs, for any of the clubs that didn't have that support.
And is it upskilling the coaches in those clubs to deliver some sort of a strength and conditioning program, or were you guys taking care of it altogether?
We do both. There'll be upskilling element with coaches, but again that comes down to coaches buy-in, and then we would have looked after an element of it as
and
well.
would you look after certain players, or is it looking after the group and giving them something?
Yeah, well,
to
we
do?
haven't kind of really. We're playing around with the idea now of how we fill them gaps with 17s and 20s, and what's the best way to go forward to it. But obviously, there needs to be buy-in from everybody, and show the clubs that don't have the resources to put full-time S&C in place that this isn't to slog the player; it's to develop the player for you first and foremost, and that they're getting physical development all year round, because you know yourself, you can't obviously take 6 months on, 6 months off. It just doesn't work. So it's trying to get that education where the clubs understand it's not, we're not pulling the player away from you. We're trying to help develop your player for you. They're not going to be missing club activities for this. This is going to work around. It's pretty much what they were doing for during championship with the Loud team is what they're going to be doing during championship for you. Like, it's not. It's just keeping that exposure.
I think what's failed in a lot of clubs to be grasped is that I think the most valuable asset that a club could have in terms of S&C isn't a senior level S&C coach, but it's a juvenile strength and conditioning coach or coach educator, because that way you have, as they term in Dublin, the conveyor belt of good athletes coming through all the time. As well as the fact that if you just are employing S&C coaches as a club, which, as you said, happens in the better resourced countries or counties, when that S&C coach leaves, everything that they've done leaves with them. Whereas if you're upskilling the volunteers within the club, which generally they're, as you said, it's up to their uptake and their keenness to learn these topics, but most of them are volunteering and want to get better as coaches, so they'll welcome any help that can be given. I think it's even more valuable for young players and for older players as well, because they start doing this stuff earlier in their career, so then they can have more longevity within their career as an adult athlete, which is what we're after in the first place. We want to increase the participation and have more people playing the games. Obviously, it's about winning at inter-county level, but if you have more players playing at club level, you have more of a pool to pick from for the inter-county.
Yeah, and the way the game's gone now, it is very athletic. Well, these new rules are saying might alter that, so we'll see. But it is so athletic now, and I suppose, like, coming through your academies to your 17s, you probably never really get any issues anywhere. Obviously, you just have to manage according to the season, but it's usually when players break into the senior team, that's usually when the kind of conflicts come. The senior managers think you're interfering with the players and so on. Like, so it's kind of just educating them that it's there to benefit you. It's nearly a free. You're getting free nutrition, you're getting free athletic development for the club season. It's not to pull away from them, but your players getting that free service, and it's only going to benefit you. And I think the clubs as well, I think, are beginning to open their eyes to that, because 9 times out of 10 most club managers are only there for 2-3 years, and then they move on, but the players will stay there. And it's just trying, obviously the players have to buy into it too, like, but it's trying to just educate the clubs and coaches that it's not to pull against, it's to
assist.
It's to assist in what you're looking to achieve as well. And if you have questions, come and chat. So it is that element of trying to do that. I suppose then your more senior players, then it's, I prefer them coming down to a gym session on a Wednesday night, heading on the beer on a Saturday, like. And the coaches are going mad about the Wednesday, but all right with the Saturday, like. So it's just that balance that everyone's in the right direction. Once it's put together properly, that everyone realises it's to benefit the player here. It's not for club or it's not for county, like.
And it's probably something that I know the GAA do try and help the lesser resource counties in certain ways, and the GPA do as well, but it's something that probably needs to be looked at further. If the goal is to probably, that they say it is, level the playing field and have it more competitive? Because
yeah, no, I think it's more it's when the intercounty season isn't on. It's what clubs like clubs in Dublin have a lot more resources available because their footfall's bigger, their members are bigger, the population, they can run a club bar and it's making a lot of money because they have the footfall, so they have a lot more resources, and it's then how can clubs and counties be creative that don't have that same resources when the intercounty season isn't on, and that's kind of where, as counties, if we can just educate clubs, the players that are within the county setups, that like it's going to, if we can kind of help work on that physical development, it's going to enhance. Or if clubs do have S&C and support that you're relaying with them, and there's a relationship between both that, again, it's kind of all about developing the player, like, but it's that kind of off season, because like it's hard for players, and if they're not being stood over, it is hard to, if someone's not standing and it's not put in place, like, and you don't have that structure,
they'd be less likely to do it.
Yeah, it is, and you want to kind of take that away from them and kind of keep that. So it's just managing both. When clubs may not have the same resource that may be available to other counties, like particularly Dublin.
It's funny though, isn't it, that it's like a cascade of things that occur. I suppose that it's usually a band-aid is put over the wound, whereas you could prevent the wound from happening in the first place by attacking it early in the career of the athlete and early on in the season, so in the off season. So the problem will typically be, geez, we don't have players available tonight because there's a load of lads injured and we have a small playing group already because players have fallen out of playing, they don't want to play anymore. If we had put in a juvenile, if we had done an off-season programme that was, I suppose, appropriate, we would probably have more players available to play. If we had implemented some sort of physical training in their underage career, then they'd already be at a level of development where they probably wouldn't have ran into these issues, or they'd be less likely to run into these issues. So therefore, we'd probably have more players to pick from because they'd stay in the sport. But what is seen is, actually, we don't need to give money for S&C, or we shouldn't be investing time into that. We just need more football, more hurling, and that's how we keep it going. Sure, they need to be playing football and hurling, 100%. But these things are to complement the training and complement the club and keep more numbers in the club to keep the club going and keep the club afloat and keep the club competing at the highest level, I suppose, that it possibly can.
Yeah, I suppose it was at Chelsea a few years back. I suppose it's that thing that doing the weights doesn't help you kick the ball over the bar, and it doesn't, but it
helps you to be there.
It helps you to be on the pitch, so you can get an opportunity to keep practicing getting the ball over the bar, and I suppose that's the message. It's not, it's not going to help you kick the ball over the bar. We're not looking to take away from skills time, because that's what wins and lose games at the end of the day. It's making sure that you get this done will keep you on the pitch, that you can practice your skills that will win the game as much as possible, and that's probably the big thing to get across to players. But I think players now are all kind of aware of that now. They're well educated on the importance of it.
You're in an interesting position in that you're doing some football coaching with your club as well, so you're seeing it from two angles, from the performance staff and from a head coaching staff. Do you implement a lot of the principles in your work with the club that you would have learned through your career in strength and conditioning and sports science?
Yeah, I think so. Kind of coaching the minors this year as well, coaching with the boys, and it's very enjoyable. Like, it's just I suppose you do. It's a different challenge. Was for me, like, it's kind of like, obviously S&C is massively important too, but it was just a different challenge, and then trying to. Obviously, I kind of have a vision of where you want to go from a physical perspective when you're working with your players and where their outcome is, and I suppose it's the same from a football perspective. You have a vision of how you want the team to play, and it's the steps to try and get them to play that. So you're kind of implementing similar stuff. You're mapping out your sessions and stuff. Like, it gives you a big advantage too from having that sports science and how you want to lay out your session and get to the point of where you want to get to it. So again, it was just like I always say, like, your S&C is massively important, but good coaching at the end of the day is what's going to win you and lose your game. If you have a good coach, you have a greater chance of winning games, no matter how good your S&C program is or conditioning program is. If you have a bad coach, again, it doesn't matter how good your strength and conditioning program is, or your athletic development program is, that it's okay if you're not fit, yeah, we'll lose you games, but if you're not a well coached team, it's very difficult to win games no matter what's happening off the pitch. Like, it's just so important, and I suppose over the last few years I've kind of really opened my eyes to that. And yeah, if you're not well coached, you don't win football matches regardless of.
Does it give you advantage in both facets or both areas? So you have an advantage as a strength and conditioning coach for GA players because you have that background knowledge of the sport that they're playing, as well as it gives you an advantage as a football coach because you have a background in how to structure a training session and a training season to get the most out of the players.
Yeah, no, it does 100%. I don't know if the players think that, they're like, Jesus, this grumpy Sloan fella's coming out, he's torturing me from a football and a gym perspective. But yeah, no, it does. Like, you can map out where you want to go with it, and you kind of what your different highs and lows throughout the year and where you want to go with it. Yeah, I think it's a big advantage anyway. And not everybody wants to go down that coaching route, obviously, but something that I've kind of always been interested in, and kind of any of the coaches or managers I've worked with over my career, and I've worked with some top coaches and managers, that you were always learning from, and everyone had a different kind of angle and a different philosophy. So for me, I was always very interested in that. And I suppose, like, from an S&C's perspective, like, you whatever coach or manager you're working with, you have to be integrated into what the football looks like. You can't just have S&C over here as one bucket and then the football's over here as one bucket. Like, it has to be integrated. So you would have always had insight with any of the coaches, even before I kind of ended up going coaching as such, that you would have always been integrating in what the managers want, what way they wanted the team to play, what kind of they wanted to see in and out of possession, what language they were using. So even from a younger age, I would have kind of been really, or from younger in my career, you would have been kind of really in tune with what that was, and then that kind of would have influenced what you did from a athletic development standpoint. So you were kind of always involved in it, really, but obviously never ended up taking the football element. And then I suppose then I kind of just grew into it, probably in the last year or two, that I enjoyed that challenge, and thankfully I've had a bit of success early doors, so it have.
Do you think we'll move to a stage where head coaches and managers and banistors are more keen to try to go out and upskill in that regard and learn a little bit more in other areas so that they can apply it better in their own area of coaching?
I think players that are retiring now, and kind of, I mean, in the last couple of years, have a very good understanding of it. Like in the last couple of years, would have a massive understanding of the physical demands, and they probably trust their athletic development, their S&C coach, whatever word title, that they kind of trust more in what their S&C coach is doing, and they're kind of more guided by their S&C coach too. Where probably you're kind of maybe older generation managers, when you were kind of, I don't mean it like that, but when you were starting out, you would have had some managers who probably would have been, people call it a bit old school, but if you want to use that word, a wee bit more old school in terms of that. Where now the kind of more retired coaches, I think, are very in tune with the rest. But
those older coaches were probably less familiar with it.
Yeah, they wouldn't have had as much access now, where most players that are retiring now are going into coaching have had a big emphasis on it. They've been probably there when it's kind of moved to a wee bit more, probably it is more athletic now, it's not art, it is, and they're probably part of that change, and they're probably more aware of it. But I do think it's still important that you still have that kind of, the coaches, like, you still have that coach's eye. Like, you can't always be guided by numbers and all that. You still need to be able to see what you see to fix, and there isn't any harm in testing the players every so often as well. Like, I think it's still an important bit. Like, you can't just be heading the laptop and hit this number and that number and think that you've got out of it.
You can't kick off your left.
Well, that's first, fix that.
Yeah, fix that first.
But yeah, like, that's both sided now at inter-county. You have to be able to do it. Like, you have to be able to hand pass left and right, just kick pass left and right. It's just, yeah, you just have to be, like, you have to be integrating that.
So we have to understand our place as a athletic development coach or a strength and conditioning coach then as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, you can't just be meddling numbers. Like if a coach needs to hit something that he needs to hit that he feels is going to have an outcome on Saturday, you're not going to say, right, you've hit 7k there, you're done. Like you can't just run out and say, right, stop, you're done. You have to let the coach have his autonomy to do what he wants to do, and just then if that means where you have to manoeuvre something else in the background, a gym session might have to turn into a more just kind of
a primer all of a sudden.
Yeah, pretty much, or something like that. The following session, you're kind of just so you still have to leave that in there. Like the coaching's the most important bit of a team sport. Like it is what wins you and loses you games, no matter what anybody says.
I think, yeah, I agree. I think we've given a balanced view of the whole lot in this podcast. So moving on to quick fire questions. First one is favourite sports person of all time.
Of all time, probably Roger Federer.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was playing tennis last night, in fact. Not that well though.
Yeah, no, I'm not a good tennis player now, but he's always kind of just how he moved and how elegant he was with how he played tennis. Like obviously Nadal was his big rival for a lot of the time. Like he was probably more force and aggression, and where Federer was just all about movement and just that strike of the ball. And so yeah, he was always good to watch.
I'd say I was more Nadal than Federer last night, but the
just
ball was not going in, it was going into the net.
I was just tripping over myself.
What have you learned in the last 12 months?
What have we learned in the last 12 months? Probably just stay calmer for longer. You don't always need to just stay calmer for longer in whatever situation that might be. Just think on it before you
React,
yeah.
Nice, a valuable lesson. What would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Do more partying. Don't have too much to. No, I'm happy enough with how it went.
Maybe you just tell him that it'd be all okay then.
Yeah,
just keep doing what you're doing.
Just keep doing what you're doing. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. No, nothing really jumps out.
Okay. Thanks a million for the conversation, Ciaran.
Yeah. No, thank you. It was
a
great
joy.
to have you up, and yeah, no, it was a pleasure.
We'll sort the car out now.
That'll be the long bit. Get the gloves on.